Good morning. Welcome to Wake Up with Ashland. My name is Eric Brooks. I'm the curator here at Ashland. It's great to be with you again today. We have a very interesting story today. This kind of a story behind a story. One of the neat things about what I do is that from time to time, I get lucky enough to find the story behind an artifact in the collection. And this was one of those cases where it took an artifact that was already an interesting artifact and made it much more so. So I'm really pleased to be able to share that and share how that came about, which also gets to the whole notion of how we learn about the things we have. Before we get into that today, I want to make a couple of quick notes. First of all, we're doing some new things technologically. I'm pleased to have today a videographer for the first time. It seemed that having a Ken worked really well for Governor Beshear, so I decided to go and get one. So I have a videographer named Ken, who is provided by a very generous board member who is in this business. So we're trying that to improve the quality of these productions. We're learning about that, and there will be some things, I'm sure, over the course of the next several that we learn as we do this. So please bear with us in the event that we have any technical challenges that result from the changes that we're making. Among other things, I'm wearing a lavalier mic, which means I'm tethered to my phone, which is a little interesting. But hopefully this will work nicely and you'll be able to see the artifacts better, and it will provide a more stable and a better presentation. So we hope that's the case. Please feel free, as always, to send in your questions. Ken will let me know what the questions are, and we'll open it up for questions again at the end of the presentation, as we always do. Also want to take a minute to shout out to Cameron. Cameron Walpole has been with us here at Ashland for some time, and she's actually the person that really started Wake Up. When the pandemic hit, we knew we needed to find ways to engage that didn't require people to be here, and doing things virtually was a good way to do that. And she developed Wake Up, and I followed on with Artifact Adventures, which became part of Wake Up. So I appreciate her doing that. She has now taken another position and is leaving Ashland completely, and I wish her luck in her new job in Maryland with the Parks Department in the counties right outside D.C. So very much appreciate her being involved with this project and getting us where we've gotten, and I really enjoy doing these, and I think this has been a great vehicle for us. So thanks, Cameron. Appreciate all you've done with this project. It's been great. That said, let's get on to the story of the day. So this is a shotgun. This particular shotgun came into the collection earlier this year. As it happened, on January 6th of this year, which is a momentous day, obviously. A lot of things happened that day. One of them, for me, was getting an email from the curator at the McLean County Museum of History in Bloomington, Illinois. They had this gun in their collection, had determined that this gun had no real relevance to their collection, and that it was relevant to ours, so they were looking to see if we would be interested in receiving it as a transfer. Now, that kind of thing is not uncommon. Museums do this when they have things that don't fit as well in their collections as they might elsewhere. I've done it. For example, I found a wallet in storage one day that belonged to the brother of John Hunt Morgan. Well, I don't know why it was here, frankly, but I transferred it to the John Hunt Morgan house downtown. They interpret that. It fits with their family. It's where it needs to be. So what we're trying to do is take items of historical importance and put them in the best possible context and where they can be the most properly interpreted. And the reason that this gun was deemed appropriate for Ashland, that it should be here, is that the evidence, the provenance, which is the history of the piece, said that it had belonged to Henry Clay. And at the time, that provenance was genealogical. They had evidence in their collection that this gun had passed from Henry Clay to his son Thomas, to one of Thomas's nieces, to her son, to, I believe, his daughter, that something approximating that. So we knew all the steps in that process, and that the ultimate individual donated it to the museum in Illinois. So that all checked out. I was able to check that through my genealogy. So given that fact, it seemed reasonable to believe that it was Henry Clay's. Now, at the time that I took this gun, I didn't know how Henry Clay acquired it. I didn't know why he had it necessarily. They believed that he had had it to hunt game, to hunt birds particularly, hunt fowl. And that seemed to make sense. It's a small gauge, probably a 20 gauge. So, okay, I can go with that. Now, Henry Clay is not someone we think of as a big game hunter or a game hunter particularly, but he had a farm. There would have been plenty of game to hunt here, so it made some sense. And we have certainly evidence that shows that they were consuming game on the dining table here at Ashland. So I could see that, but I didn't have that story. So obviously, that's a story of great import. It makes the gun far more interesting to know why Henry Clay had it and where he got it. Well, I didn't have that information. I looked. I couldn't find any reference to a gift of a gun in the papers, which the published papers of Henry Clay. So I didn't have a lead particularly to go on, but I thought, well, maybe at some point something will turn up, and then something did. I was asked by a gentleman with the Clark County Winchester Heritage Commission to speak at Holyrood in Winchester. Holyrood is a historic house about the same era of Ashland, very similar in some ways, that was built by a man named James Clark. James Clark was a very important early 19th century politician and attorney in Kentucky. He was a good friend of Henry Clay's. He was a founder of the Whig Party, Henry Clay's party in Kentucky, served with Kentucky in the federal legislature and the state legislature, and became our 13th governor and the first Whig to hold that position in 1836. So when he asked me to do that, I didn't know a whole lot about James Clark. So I needed to do the research to be able to speak to their audience about Clark and Clay. In doing that research, when I went to the papers, I was able to look Clark up, and he's in the index, and it told me what letters and documents in the papers contain references to him. And an amazing thing emerged. I found in the papers in 1829 and 30 a series of letters in which he is referenced that tell the story of this gun. So those letters start in 1829. Clay has agreed to send to the British ambassador to the United States, a man named Charles R. Vaughan, a Kentucky rifle. So he arranges to have it made with an artisan here locally, and eventually ships it to Vaughan in Washington. And he does that via James Clark. That's connection A. Vaughan receives the gun. He is very, very happy, thinks it's a beautiful piece, and wants to reciprocate in some way. So he asks Clay, what would you like from England? Clay writes back and he says, I want an English fowling piece. Don't spend a lot of money, but a nice English fowling piece. And a fowling piece is a gun built to hunt birds, ducks, geese, pheasants, quail, that sort of thing, pigeons. A shotgun usually. And so Vaughan says, fine, I can do that. And eventually he procures this gun. I firmly believe this is the gun that was sent to Henry Clay by Charles Vaughan. We know in the papers Clay received the gun. We know from the papers that it was a single barrel shotgun, as is this one. We know that it was a percussion cap weapon. This lock is a percussion cap lock. And you place the cap there on the nipple, and when the trigger is pulled, it comes down and hits the cap. That creates the spark, which lights the projectile in the barrel and fires the projectile. Now, this technology was invented in 1822. This is an improvement on the previous flintlocks, which fouled in a variety of ways very easily. This is much easier to operate, much less susceptible to that, so it was a big improvement. But it hadn't appeared in the United States much by 1830. So this would have been one of the first, or one of the earliest, percussion cap weapons in the United States. So early that in addition to the gun, Vaughan sent Clay a bag of percussion caps so that he could use the gun immediately without having to track down those caps. So this fits the description in the letters perfectly. So I firmly believe this is the gun Clay received from the U.S. ambassador, the British ambassador to the United States in 1830 in exchange for the Kentucky long rifle that he had sent to that ambassador. That's a much more interesting story. Makes it a much more important piece than previously. And I never would have known that had I not looked for James Clark, who delivered this gun to Henry Clay. So there's a case where having the right information, that little single piece leads to this whole story. And sometimes that's just the way we find things. Sometimes you can get there very directly. I couldn't do that in this case. So anyway, this is a very, very high-end, a very nice English shotgun made by a company called William Moore and Company. This company existed for several years in the early 19th century, prior to 1830. They still exist. It's now called William Moore and Gray, and I am actually communicating with the chairman of their board about this gun, trying to find documents in their archives that would further elucidate the story. So it's a fascinating piece, and it's a beautiful shotgun in extraordinary condition. All there, all intact, still has the original ramrod, all of it. So that's really remarkable, and it's on display in Henry Clay's study, which is probably where he would have kept it. And he would have taken it out, might have taken it out just when he was riding around on the property, inspecting his livestock, etc. Maybe bring home a few birds for dinner. Probably took it out sometimes on specific hunting expeditions as well. So, remarkable piece. And we're really, really pleased to have this in the collection now. And it's great when things like this all come together. Now, I decided when I was going to do this today that in addition to showing this gun, that I would show the other guns in the collection. We don't have many, but the ones that we have are pretty spectacular. This is another shotgun. It is also English, made by William Greener and Company. And it's engraved likewise on the barrels there. And you can see here, he says, inventor of laminated steel. So what Greener figured out is that by laminating steel, making a series of very thin layers into one piece, it made the steel much stronger and much less likely to be damaged over time through use. So he made laminated steel shotguns, which were very expensive shotguns. And this company still exists and still makes shotguns. This particular gun was made in 1873. It was owned by Harry Independence Clay, a grandson of Henry Clay, who used it on an Arctic expedition on which he traveled. He spent a year essentially in the Arctic, and during the winter months, while he was waiting for the expedition to come back, which they did in late spring, he used this gun to hunt birds, and he stockpiled hundreds of these birds for consumption by the expedition that was eventually going to come back. They got there initially. There were some problems. They had to return. He agreed to stay behind to prepare for their return. That's a whole long and interesting story. There's a whole Wake Up With Ashland on that alone. If you want to hear that, let me know, and someday I'll do the Harry story, which is a fascinating story. But he used this gun on that expedition, and it passed through his family and eventually back to Ashland. It's got 2 percussion cap hammers. This one is a breech loader, unlike the other, which is a muzzle loader. So this one you open up from this end, put your shells in, lock it back, and it's ready to fire. And it's got the 2 triggers because it has 2 barrels. So again, a very, very fine, very high-end weapon for hunting birds. This is our other long gun. This gun is our only rifle. This is a classic Winchester repeating rifle. This is the gun you often see in westerns, cowboy movies, that sort of thing. This is a classic American firearm right here. This particular one is a model 1886. This model was in production from 1886 well into the 20th century. So it's a model that lasted a long time, very well made. It's a lever action, so you pull this down and back to load the round. It has a 17-round magazine tube. So this gun could hold multiple rounds. This gun can be fired multiple times without having to reload it. This gun is a .45-70 caliber, so this is a big game rifle. This gun was meant to hunt buffalo, to hunt other large game, antelope, deer, elk, that sort of thing. And you can see up here we have elk antlers. Those were taken by Henry Clay's great-grandson-in-law, Deshay Breckinridge, and we have antlers up here that were taken by Major McDowell. Major McDowell, Henry Clay McDowell, actually used this gun. He was a big game hunter, a friend of Theodore Roosevelt's. They hunted together on occasion. He was a member of the Boone and Crockett Club, which is a club formed by Theodore Roosevelt and a few of his close friends to promote conservation and hunting. And you join by hunting a certain number and kind of animals. So he would have used this probably out west, has the long distance sights for hunting big game. So this is specially set up for that. And I have the records from the Winchester Company, the ledger showing exactly when this was manufactured. In fact, all three of these guns, well, this one in the greener, we have serial numbers and can date them from the serial numbers. We know this is Major McDowell's because he carved his initials into the stock. So there's no question who this is. Now, I don't know for sure. He may have had this done by the Winchester Company or someone else, but it has got that on there, so we know it was his gun. And it passed through his family and eventually to Ashland. And it's a beautiful piece. Now, we only have one pair of pistols in the collection, but they're very, very important. These are a matched dueling set. Sets like these were manufactured for the express purpose of dueling. And you can see the two guns are identical, or would have been originally. These were made by a man named William Mortimer. These are also English. Oddly, all but the Winchester in our collection, all of the guns in our collection, save the Winchester, are English. These are actually the oldest guns in the collection. These were manufactured about 1795, so quite old. Clay obtained these guns, Henry Clay obtained these guns from a friend when he was to fight his first duel in 1809 with Humphrey Marshall. That friend's name was William Lord Morton. Morton was a big businessman here in Lexington, owned several businesses down in this block that is now City Center. Also was a deputy sheriff of Fayette County. So if you're going to borrow weapons to violate the law, I guess borrow them from law enforcement. That's what Henry Clay did. So he borrows the guns in 1809. Now, these were not used in the duel because Clay was the challenger. And the rules of the duel state that the challenged party chooses the weapons, and Humphrey Marshall chose a set his second provided. So, take these out here. You can see this also has a percussion lock. Now, that lock is not original. These were modified. This was originally flintlock, and the flintlock was taken off, and the percussion lock added. If I would take this one out here, this one's missing the hammer and the lock plate on the outside. You can see here the nipple where the percussion cap goes. If you look really carefully, you can see here there's a spot where this piece of the barrel was cut out and a new piece inserted so that it could be fitted for percussion cap technology. So these have been modified. And you may say, why haven't we restored these? Well, everything that's happened to these is part of the history of these pieces, and we do not want to lose that history. It's important history. The fact that these were converted is very important to the second part of the story. These guns, we are fairly certain, were taken by Henry Clay Jr. to the Mexican War and used by him in that war, and thence sent back to Ashland by him before he died. So that's very important. And the fact that they were modified for percussion caps is evidence of that. The fact that this is missing is evidence that the Clay boys were probably playing with these, playing, I don't know, Cowboys and Indians or Revolutionary War or whatever boys played in that era. And that's probably how that got lost. So again, it tells a story that is a story worth telling. This box is original. This is how these would have come from the manufacturer. It would have come with several things. This little device is designed to measure powder. So depending on how far you're planning on shooting or how powerfully you want your shot to be, this device is marked in increments, and it allows you to set the amount of powder that you put in your pistol. Well, this also has little compartments. If I can get this open here. That's a place to keep things like percussion caps and ammunition. So everything you need to use these weapons can be contained in this box. And you can see it's got the original manufacturer's label. And the family added a statement about dueling pistols presented to Henry Clay by Lord Morton. So after the duel, in the 1830s, Morton died. And when he died, his will was probated, and these were left to Henry Clay in that will. So that's how these came into the family, and they've been passed through the family and are now part of our collection. And so we're very pleased to have these wonderful dueling pistols so we can interpret Henry Clay and his dueling activities. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point, if anybody has any questions.
I have some questions. Somebody said that first rifle was a quality rifle, but
All of the guns in our collection are really quite high quality. I mean, these would have been expensive, especially in this period. Guns were expensive generally, but these all would have been very high end. The fact that 3 out of the 4 things that I showed are English goes to that some degree. I mean, these would have been among the finest available. So no question about it. I mean, in the Winchester, by the time it came along, this was cutting edge technology. This would have been and still is a very functional, very
magic of.
Sorry about that technology. Anyway, so yeah.
They also expressed some interest in learning more about Harry's expedition.
Okay, we can do that. That's a whole wake up in itself. I've got all sorts of things for that. That's a great story, kind of a sad story when you know all of it, but I will work on that one. We'll do that at some point in the not distant future. While I think of it, I want to add that, as I said last time, we now have a new online catalog, which you can go to henryclay.org, click on the Learn tab, go to the bottom. There is a thing for the online catalog. Just click that and it opens up the catalog. You can search the whole collection. I also have a folder there that you can click on called Wake Up With Ashland. All of these artifacts are in that folder, so you don't have to even look for them. They're all right there. You can look at all the photos you want, more information about them. It's all there for you. So please take a look at that and check out these amazing pieces.
There was a question of, I believe it's asking if Henry Clay's descendants still live in Lexington?
There are a number of descendants here in town, yes. There are quite a few descendants in general. And yes, there are a number of them here in town. We are fortunate to have great relations with the family in general. We've worked hard to develop those over the years. While this is a public place and we want a wide public to take a part of it, we feel a great responsibility to the family. This is the family home place, and we want them to maintain that. We want them to be welcome here, to feel comfortable with that, because it's their heritage, and we understand that. And so we've worked very hard to create those relationships. And it's because of them that a lot of these things are here. Of the things I've showed you today, with the exception of the one that I got from Bloomington, Illinois, the other 3 I got directly from the family. So these came to Ashland directly from descendants. Their generosity makes it possible for us to do what we do and for me to do what I'm doing now. So there is no question that is critically important.
When did the dueling rifles, when were they manufactured?
These were manufactured, the dueling pistols were manufactured in 1795, so they were very early.
How many duels was Henry Clay in?
He fought 2 duels, 1809 with Humphrey Marshall and 1826 with John Randolph. When he fought that duel, Clay was United States Secretary of State. John Randolph was a United States Senator. So they cross over to Arlington, Virginia. They fight their duel in Arlington. There's actually a historical marker there. So imagine that. Sitting U.S. Secretary of State and sitting U.S. Senator shooting at each other in view of the Capitol. Kind of a wild thought, hard to imagine.
Beautiful guns.
Well, if there are no other questions, it's been great being with you this morning. I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation, and we'll look forward to coming to you again soon. And like I say, I'll try to slot in herring here in the near future, and we'll look at that. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.